tuning in to the first episode of From the Cowboy State podcast. I'll be your host, Michaela Getz, agriculture and natural resources educator in Park County, Wyoming, with the University of Wyoming. We have for our first guest, Micah Most, and I'm going to let him go ahead and introduce himself and tell you what he does with the University of Wyoming, where he's located throughout the state, and all of that good information.
Thanks, Michaela. Hi, everyone. My name is Micah Most. I am in the same position as Michaela, so I'm an agriculture and natural resources extension educator with University of Wyoming Extension, and I am based out of Johnson County, so I serve in the Buffalo office.
Amazing. So for those who may be tuning in who aren't necessarily from Wyoming, where exactly is Johnson County in Buffalo?
Yeah, we have the great fortune of being right at the foot of the Bighorn Mountains on the eastern side, north central Wyoming. So, we're right at the junction of Interstate 25 and Interstate 90.
Awesome. And because I didn't clarify, Park County is in the upper northwest corner, and we kind of butt up against Yellowstone National Park, and it's about a 3.5-hour, 4-hour drive from Johnson County and Buffalo.
It is, yeah. You drive over the Bighorns to get from Park County to Johnson County, but it's a beautiful drive this time of year for sure.
It is, yeah. Micah and I are both spoiled of where we're located here. Amazing. So, Micah, tell me a little bit about how you came to work with Extension and how you came to work in Wyoming, because you're not from Wyoming, right?
I am not originally, no. I grew up in western Nebraska on a family farm and ranch. Yeah. So my dad is the fourth generation on that place. It's a lot of row crop production and being in Nebraska. Yeah. So a lot of corn, a lot of soybeans, some popcorn, which is kind of a fun one. Nebraska's #1 for popcorn production in the United States, and also cow-calf, small cow-calf herd. So I always loved the livestock and the range side of things. So when I finished high school, I went on to study animal science at the University of Nebraska, UNL, University of Nebraska-Lincoln. So I'm not a Wyoming Cowboy alumni, but I work for them now. And I've been here in Johnson County for almost 2 years now, serving as the extension educator.
Exciting. That's great. So agriculture has a really vast meaning, especially in 2024. I feel like, agriculture, especially when our grandpas, great-grandpas were in the field, in the combines, harvesting, what have you, it could have meant one thing, or at least people viewed it as one way, and extension was maybe seen as one thing. Folks were coming into the office asking questions, but now in 2024, and especially post-pandemic, it's really evolved. So how do you see agriculture, or what does agriculture really mean to you in this day and age?
Yeah, wow, that's a big question, Michaela. That's a really big question. I love it, though. I think agriculture for me means working with natural systems, so thinking about our soils and our water and air and plants and livestock, so working with all of those natural elements to produce food and fiber and fuel that support human life. Yeah. So it's a really hefty responsibility, and it's a great joy for me to work in this area. And like you said, agriculture looks different everywhere you go around the globe, even across the state here in Wyoming. Agriculture looks very different from Park County to Johnson County. But there's a lot of really important, hardworking folks in the industry doing their best every day to care for our resources.
Absolutely. Well, and it's funny talking about just how it looks from one side of the state to the other. You've got grizzly bears on one side being relocated from one part to the other, and then you've got what it looks like in Albany County, what it looks like over in Gillette to here, and it's amazing how people, and even just how it's evolved from agritourism too, and people paying millions of dollars to travel to the state from all over the country, really. And just who would have seen that, or who would have thought that,
Yeah. Yeah, we have a great way of life in our agricultural communities.
Absolutely. So we've briefly touched on agriculture and how we see it and how it plays an impact in our lives. But let's talk about a side that maybe folks don't necessarily think about or may not think to tap into, and grant programs specifically, how they help people, and specifically the Western SARE program. Because that's a big part in how people are working on projects and, kind of moving forward and things here in 2024, like what we're talking about with agriculture. And for those who don't know who are listening in, the SARE is a program that comes from the U.S. Department of Agriculture's National Institute for Food and Agriculture. And it's actually broken up into 4 different regions to distribute, information, stories, grants, projects, etc. And jump in, if I miss something. But there's a multitude of different grant programs, but one specific one that we're going to touch on, and maybe a couple others, is the Professional and Producer Program. So
yeah,
tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So just to reiterate a few of those acronyms, because they're, in government work and in grant programs, there's always a ton of acronyms. So USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. SARE is Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education. So that's a program nested under the USDA. And here in Wyoming, we sit in the western region of SARE. So Western SARE, or WSARE, is that Sustainable Ag Research and Education program here in Wyoming, funded at the federal level. And there are several opportunities for folks that are interested in maybe trying something new, a sustainable agriculture practice that they're curious to know if it might work for them in their system, but don't necessarily want to take on the financial risk with going out on a limb and trying something new in their area. So there are a couple grant programs that they're eligible for, and we'll get into the details of those here in a moment. One other definition I wanted to talk a little bit about is sustainable agriculture, because that's a little bit of a buzzword, kind of a buzzy term that's flying around a lot now, and it can mean different things to different people.
Sure.
So just so that folks that are listening in know what page we're on. Oh, and I guess I'm jumping ahead. You're probably going to ask me about this in a moment.
No, I appreciate it.
So sustainable ag is, I guess, thinking about ways that we can return into the system. So like I mentioned with agriculture earlier, working in natural systems. So a lot of our more traditional agricultural methods are extractive, or we're harvesting, but we're not necessarily putting things back in. And so synthetic chemicals and some of those things have become really popular inputs. Those things are really expensive though. So in the sustainable agriculture kind of sphere, we're thinking about things that are byproducts or other uses of things that we already have access to in our systems. And another kind of buzzy concept is soil health. Right now, that's a big part of sustainable agriculture, and we could probably have lots of arguments one way or another about what soil health is and what that looks like. But thinking about really caring for the resources that we're using to produce our crops and our livestock, that would be one very broad definition of sustainable agriculture that I would offer to our listeners today.
I'm really happy that you brought up soil health, which I'm sure, especially being in Wyoming, we know can be a controversial topic, if you will. But, soil health, and especially focused on Wyoming, talking about the alkali soils or the calcareous or, saline soils, what have you. Soil health in Wyoming, it differs, of course, from across the nation. We're not in Indiana or Illinois, Iowa, what have you. But so what does our soil health really look like? Do you have native growth on your land? If you do, that's a good step in the right direction.
It is.
And so like what you're talking about. So what does sustainable agriculture mean for us? And then what are you putting back into your project? So I'm glad that you talked about that. So what else are key points with this grant program?
Yeah, so there are 2 that we're going to be talking about here today. The first one that I'll reference is the Farmer Rancher Grant Program.
Yeah.
And I'll be sure to send you all of this information to put in the show notes for anyone that's listening.
Yeah, we'll put all the important links in.
Great.
For people.
So the Farmer Rancher Grant Program is for producers, either individually or in small groups that want to work on some kind of research project in the sustainable ag area. I guess one example that comes to mind that would be an easy one that might apply pretty broadly across the state is cover cropping, whether in a hay system or in a row crop system. So if you want to try a new species for cover crop that maybe hasn't been grown in your area before, and you're curious but you don't want to take on that financial risk, there's an opportunity through this grant. And the Farmer Rancher Grant is for 1 to 2 producers can apply for up to $25,000. Or if you find one more friend plus, so 3 or more producers can apply for up to $29,900. And there are a few stipulations as a part of this program. You need to work with a technical advisor is what they're calling it. And that can be someone from an agency. Extension would be the very natural fit. So you look up your closest agriculture, natural resources extension educator through University of Wyoming Extension, and tell them that you're interested in this grant opportunity and you want them to maybe step in as your technical advisor. And so they would work with you to go through and complete the application for the grant. There is an educational requirement, so you can't just try things and not tell anyone how it went.
Sure.
You have to put on a workshop or write an article or a paper to send out or have a field day at the site of your research plots.
And now, does this have to be done within a certain time, the research component, like 6 months, 36 months?
Great question. Yeah, so this one is actually open for up to 3 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The deadline is October of 2024. But let's see. I know I've marked this somewhere. I believe the first funding, if you are funded for this project, that's announced in March of 2025. And then you have, I think starting in April of 2025 is when or as soon as they get the funds to you. And then you have up to 3 years from that point, depending on how you set up your project in your application.
Oh, great.
So up to 3 years.
Wow.
And up to whatever the limit is based on the number of people on your team.
And to jog back to your second point, let's just say that somebody in Uinta County already has a great relationship with maybe their conservation district, contact at their conservation district. Do they have to work with an extension educator, or could they work with, another?
Yeah, that's a great question. It does not have to be an extension educator.
Just somebody in that. Someone
who meets the definition of technical advisor as laid out in the proposal, call for proposals. And I do want to mention that the producers applying for this need to be defined as independent producers. And so if it's a father-daughter applying and they're both working for the same operation, they don't technically meet the definitions of being independent from one another.
Sure.
So it needs to
that
be,
makes sense.
if you're partnering with Farmer Rancher, you can do that with one person. So that's not an issue, or one operation. But for this other one that we're going to talk a little bit about here, professional plus producer grant program, that one requires a minimum of at least 3 independent producers.
Okay.
And so those need to be folks from different operations that are not connected to each other.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the difference between the two, the main difference between the Farmer Rancher grant and the professional plus producer grant is the second one, professional plus producer, has a larger funding limit. So that one is up to $85,000 over a 3-year period. So it's a larger funding pool and maybe a larger project, and because of that, they want more people involved.
Sure, more collaboration.
Yep, exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Okay, so now have you worked on any of these grant programs in the past?
I haven't. I would
Okay.
love to, and that's why we're here talking about it today, because I have a lot of interest in sustainable agriculture and in supporting applied research, on farm research, wherever that might need to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I am familiar with a few other projects in the state, and I think you can get on the Western SARE website and
Mm-hmm.
look back through, because all of this, once it funds are awarded to a project and that project is executed,
Mm-hmm.
all of that information goes into the public domain.
Oh, wow.
So
That's a
it
great
goes back to
resource.
benefit the public. So you can go
Mm-hmm.
through and actually look at what types of projects have been funded in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in our area where there's not a ton of row crop farming,
Sure.
a lot of it's related to increasing water points in
Mm-hmm.
pastures
Mm-hmm.
and then doing a rotational grazing
That's
system,
great.
um, and setting it up so that cattle and sheep aren't having to trail all the way back to the tank in the same place every day, and really grazing down
Sure.
the forage that's right in that area.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, that was going to be my next question. It was if you had examples. So that's perfect. So jumping backwards here a little bit,
Mhm.
we've talked about sustainable agriculture a bit. That could take up a whole podcast by itself.
Yeah.
And really, we've hit on the big three of sustainable ag, which are, environmental, social, and really economic impact. And speaking of, a big undertaking and something that seems to really always be on any rancher producer's mind is keeping livestock happy. We know we were just talking about this last week a little bit between a different group of us, which, you were a part of, livestock stress.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see a correlation, since we are in Johnson County, not necessarily a huge row crop county like you had mentioned, do you see any way to correlate either one of these grant programs to applying for a grant here, applying for a project with these grants in relation to livestock stress as a producer?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. So, um, there are a lot of environmental stressors in
Mm-hmm.
Wyoming on our livestock. Thinking especially of our winter weather, and also grazing at elevation for a lot of our ranchers that have Forest Service leases up on the
Mm-hmm.
mountain, wherever that may be.
Absolutely.
Um, and there's a lot of great work being done currently at the university. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
grad students working on high elevation and brisket disease type projects. I'm not sure. How that would necessarily fit into one of these projects, but I'm sure that there are people out there
Mm-hmm.
with problems, and they're trying to find ways to solve those, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe have ideas that they want to try.
Sure.
And I think, yeah, if it can fit into the goals of this program, and I should have mentioned this as well while we were talking about sustainable ag earlier. Um, the goals of Western SARE
Mm-hmm.
are to promote good stewardship, to enhance quality of life of farmers and ranchers, and viability of rural communities, to protect health and safety of those involved in food and farm systems, to promote crop, livestock, and enterprise diversification, and to examine the regional economic, social, and environmental implications of adopting sustainable ag practices. So, as far as livestock stress, I guess maybe the example I used earlier of increasing water points. So
Mm-hmm.
so those animals aren't having to walk
Right.
as far to water every day. Because that is, a range cow covers a lot of miles
Mm-hmm.
during the
Absolutely.
summer grazing season. And that's usually at a time of year where she might be past peak lactation,
Mm-hmm.
but is trying to put on some condition again, trying to breed back at that same
Mm-hmm.
time. And then, the summer temperatures, especially in the lower elevations, are starting to heat up. So there's some
Absolutely.
potential for heat stress there as well. So, like you mentioned earlier, we want to keep our animals
Mm-hmm.
comfortable and productive. So anything we can do to enhance that would fit, I think, into these parameters.
Absolutely. And also, one thing that you made me think of a little bit when you were talking about cover crops and everything, there's the specialty crop program, which I know is a whole different grant program. But do you believe that there could be or have you heard of anything where there could be, possibly extra funding for if somebody wanted to do a cover crop program, or I'm sorry, application for one of these programs, if they were also planting specialty crops
Yeah.
from that
Yeah,
list?
that's a great point. I don't have the requirements for the Wyoming Department of Ag specialty
Mm-hmm.
crop block grant in front of me, but I think that adopting a no-till practice
Mm-hmm.
to promote soil health, cover cropping in the fall to keep something living in the soil once, if it's a vegetable farm and they've finished production for the year, but we're not into the dead of winter yet,
Mm-hmm.
and there's that window there. Um, Definitely some room through these grants to explore cover cropping, and the list goes on. Yeah, I mean, you name it. There's probably a way to frame it that it would fit the requirements of this grant.
Okay, fair
Hmm.
enough.
And that's a great point too, that there are tons of grants out
Right.
there beyond just the few that we've
Mm-hmm.
mentioned here today. Um, and if you want information, or if listeners want
Mm-hmm.
information about anything, I recommend that they contact their extension office,
Mm-hmm.
and those folks are qualified to help them look through all of the opportunities online.
Absolutely.
And yeah, we have a lot of great resources and people available to us through the university networks.
Mm-hmm.
That's the great thing about extension, is it's literally an extension of the university in local
Yes.
communities. So, and we're free of charge
Yes.
for most things, are not at any cost to the
Yeah.
general public.
Yeah, we are named on purpose. We are an extension. We are a branch of the university. And yeah, I feel like folks are always surprised to know that the services we provide are just that extensive
Hmm.
and are free,
Yeah, and
which is
we
great.
don't always have all the answers right off the top of
Sure,
our heads,
sure.
but chances are we can find somebody that does.
Yeah, and we'll get it back to you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, well, I'm going to shift topics just one more time on you, Micah. You know, you're in Johnson County. Sheridan is just right in your backyard. I'm in Park County with Cody, Powell, and Matiti and Yellowstone.
Hmm.
So I feel like we both experience first time ranch owners, and we get a lot of questions of, I want to learn, but I just don't know where to start, or I just don't know what to do. So this is a two-part question. What advice do you have for your first time ranch owner, as well as your established multi generational ranch owner?
Yeah.
Not loaded at
Wow.
all.
That's a big question too. But it's great. Learning is a lifelong endeavor,
It
whether you're
is.
just getting started in ranching and agriculture, or whether you've been at it for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, for the kind of beginning farmer rancher,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, again, ask your extension office what
Mm-hmm.
resources they have, because we do have a whole host of resources developed specifically for that audience.
Mm-hmm.
There are opportunities for people who don't necessarily have access to land of their own.
Mm-hmm.
The Wyoming Food Coalition is developing a land link program. So if you have an idea for an enterprise but don't have a space for it, they can help connect you with a landowner who would support kind of a beginner farmer rancher. John Hewlett in the Ag Econ department has
Yes.
developed a ton of resources
Mm-hmm.
for beginner farmers and ranchers. Also for young folks that are just curious about
Mm-hmm.
agriculture and want to give it a try. There's a beginning farmer and rancher internship available through the agricultural economics department.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's also a ranch management and agricultural leadership program that's in
Yes.
the works through the university as a major, an independent
Mm-hmm.
major, new in the College of Agriculture. So if folks are in the college phase of life, or that's something they're interested in going back and pursuing,
Mm-hmm.
that's an option. And that program also offers a series of community courses around the state each spring.
Mm-hmm.
So seeking out those continuing ed
Mm-hmm.
opportunities in communities would be a great way to brush up some skills. And I guess maybe that's my transition to the experienced ranchers. attending workshops.
Mm-hmm.
And I always find it really beneficial to attend the different industry organization gatherings,
Mm-hmm.
and just visiting with people from other
Absolutely.
places and other operations and learning how they're doing what they're doing, and bouncing ideas off of them, and seeing how they overcome certain challenges in their area, and maybe, a solution that they've tried could work
That's
in a
true.
different place. Yeah, there are lots of places to find information. Um, and I think that's also the beauty of extension is we're place based. So you can get on YouTube and you can look up ranching information, but it might be coming from a completely different landscape and
Sure.
set of conditions.
Could be coming from somebody at UNL.
It
Just
it could
kidding.
be coming from someone at UNL, totally. Yeah, not that they're that different from Wyoming,
No.
but yeah. So making sure that wherever you're seeking out your information is evidence based
Yeah.
and relevant in your context.
Yeah.
So thinking about the high plains and the sagebrush steppe. There's not a lot of sagebrush steppe in Nebraska, so um, yeah,
That's
that would
great.
be my response to that question.
That's great. Well, before we close out, any upcoming programs in Johnson County, any statewide initiatives you want to share with anyone?
Yeah. So we have been busy here in Johnson County. We're definitely switching into county fair
Mm-hmm.
season.
It is that
So
time.
that will be a big focus until we get through the last week of July, first week of
Yeah.
August. Um, but before that, I will put a plug in for the Wyoming Wool Growers Sheep and Wool
Mm-hmm.
Festival
Absolutely.
taking place in Thermopolis this year, and
That's going to
that's
be a great
July
time.
12th to the 14th.
Fantastic.
So Extension will be there teaching about some of the wool and sheep
Mm-hmm.
production science. But there will be lots of fiber artists. There will be live music.
Mm-hmm.
There will be some other professors from on campus in Laramie doing cooking demonstrations
Oh,
of how
wow.
to prepare different cuts of lamb, and with
Yeah,
tasting,
that's
you'll
great.
have a chance to taste.
And is there a cost to the Wool Festival?
Most of that is available at no cost.
Okay,
There's a dinner on the Saturday night, and that one does require registration.
sure.
Um, so that's one. Let's see what else is
And
going
that's in
on.
Thermopolis,
It's in
right?
Thermopolis.
Thermopolis. Okay,
Yes, we'll be on the Hot Springs County Fairgrounds
great.
in
So people
Thermopolis.
can come out, soak in the hot springs, attend the Wool
Yeah,
Festival.
yeah, and it's a totally family friendly
Might be a little hot for the hot springs,
environment.
but
It will be
still come out.
warm. It
Yeah.
will be warm in Thermopolis in July,
Yeah.
but it'll be a great experience. Yeah, county fair, Wyoming State Fair.
Mm-hmm.
Hoping to have some beef and sheep production workshops up this way.
Okay.
Also, yeah, I've got several things kind of on the back burner, and later this fall I'll be doing a couple Wyoming walks programs around,
Nice.
mostly around here in
Mm-hmm.
Buffalo. Um, the two that I have left on my itinerary will be looking at the trees in historic Buffalo,
Oh,
and
that'll be
um,
fun.
I'm hoping to get some of our partners from Wyoming State Forestry involved
Mm.
there
Mm-hmm.
to talk about what grows well here and what doesn't. And then we'll do a kind of a fall nature walk down one of the trails as well. So
Very
those
fun.
are, I guess, those are the local
Yeah,
events that I've got. Not
very
quite on the
fun.
calendar yet, but in the works.
So if you're in Johnson County or want to come out too, there's a whole stack of events.
Yeah,
Very
totally.
fun.
And folks can follow along on Facebook and Instagram, UW Extension Johnson County, for any Buffalo, KC area events.
Very great. Okay, well, Micah, thank you for your time. Guys, Micah is located in Johnson County at the Buffalo Extension Office. If you have any interest in the grant programs, we will include his contact information. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in. Again, this was the first episode of From the Cowboy State podcast. I'm your host, Michaela Getz, and we were joined by Micah Most from Johnson County. Thank you so much. Once again, everybody, thank you for tuning in to the first episode of From the Cowboy State, a University of Wyoming Extension podcast. My name's Michaela Getz, your host, and I am an agriculture and natural resources educator with the University of Wyoming, located in Park County. University of Wyoming is an affirmative action, equal opportunity educator and employer, and don't forget that everything that the University of Wyoming Extension does is research-based. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to your local extension office. And if you don't know where to find that information, please don't hesitate to just go into Google, type in uyo.edu/UWE, and you will find a full list of your local extension offices. If you have any questions, like I said, don't hesitate to reach out. This podcast and all future podcasts will be available on Spotify as well as Apple Podcast. And if you want to follow along and see what episodes will be coming up, as well as previously posted episodes, those will actually be found in a few places. You can follow along on Facebook and Instagram, and you can type in our name from the Cowboy State to find both of those pages on those social media channels. But then we will also be transcribing these episodes. So if you're not one to plug in some earplugs and listen, you can read about them, and those will be transcribed for you. And that will, for now, be housed on the Park County Extension website. So stay tuned, check those out. And again, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us.